It's showtime, folks.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Into the Music. I'm here with my cohort and co-conspirator, Andy. Andy, how are you doing on this fine evening?
John, I am doing well, sir. Ready to cohort and conspire with you. So what did you have in mind?
Well, we hit the town first, take a car. no.
Okay, that kind of night. All right.
I've heard that cars are really easy to steal in America. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, I've never stolen one and never had one of mine stolen. So knock on wood.
And apparently all you have to do is walk into any sort of convenience store and they'll give you money. Apparently that's really easy as well. This is all these cultural things we've learned from your propaganda films that you sent over to our country.
Oh, country mouse. That's just the beginning of it.
Whereas here, everything's shut at 11. No, not anymore. But when I was growing up, dead after 11 o'clock at night. It was unbelievable. But anyway, I digress. So yes, I have a rip snorter of a track for you.
I love all of your adjectives for these songs. Rip snorter and barn stomper and oh god, it's great.
Yes, it's a toe tapper of yesteryear. It really is. So have you heard of a band called The Sound?
No, I haven't. It's
another one. You remember we were talking about hum, and I said surely that's already taken.
Yeah.
The Sound,
That's I was like, come on. How was it? If the band was already taken, certainly The Sound has to be next in line as
exactly
band name.
But no. Two. So not to influence you in any way whatsoever, but this is probably the best band you've never heard of. But anyway, the track is called Heyday.
Heyday. All right. Well, I'll give it a listen, and we'll see if I too agree that this is the best band I've never heard of.
You won't, but I'll work on that.
Yeah. So far, checks out. I'm digging it. This is good.
You're so young to be confused, but I know that the time it starts, all the conflict seems to fuse, leaving you in the dark. Find yourself on the sea, never thought that this you drown. You were trying to find your feet, can't believe they cut you down. Can't believe they cut you down. In your head, in your head.
Oh yeah, this is spicy. I'm liking this. I'm liking this a lot.
You've been pressured into the hard cell, victim of a nation's scheming as the expectations swell. You retreat inside your dreaming, find yourself on a
taking this back. I need to hear all this again because I know it's about to end, and there's no way I'm hearing that guitar part just once. So. Whew. Energy, just all energy, organized chaos. It was great. It was rebellious sounding. And good God, that guitar that sounded like some sort of laser gun was just the cherry on top. Cool. Good suggestion, John.
Here we are once again.
Yes, we are. That was, as the kids say, John, a banger.
Yeah.
It was good, man. I really, really enjoyed it. There was so much energy, man. Just energy.
It wasn't like complicated. It was just bang. Here's the bloody song. Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot to unpack or to like wade through. It was it's like, here's this, and you know what it was. But god damn, it was good. Like, I loved the energy of that song. The guitars were so good. The bass was so driving. I just wrote guitars, then bass, drums, and like that's all. Like, that's what they were throwing at me, and it was so like the guitar had so much energy in it. It kind of reminded me of like the earliest versions of that kind of like jangly guitar, you know, kind of just ferocious in its drive. Like, there's nothing subtle about it, and I really dug that. I mean, obviously, this is the millionth time I've referenced that one of my favorite albums of all time is Whatever People Say I Am, That Is What I'm Not, and that whole album is like an homage to that style of music. And this is, I would have to imagine, an earlier iteration, almost what they were paying homage to. And
100%.
dude, it's just a real kick you in the ass 3 minutes of just energy and fun, and I enjoyed every second of it. The one thing that I was trying to make out that I don't know if I could make out was the part where the guitar is doing the real staccato notes. Is there also like a key note that's getting hit staccato that almost sounds like it's harmonizing with the guitars? Because I heard that and I was like, is there a keyboardist in this bit? Because it didn't feel like they were doing much else aside from that. Not to say that they don't in other songs or whatever, as if that speaks to their level of talent. This is all that was called for in this song from the keyboard. But I heard that, and that kind of like stood out to me because that's not something I'm used to hearing in this kind of music, because usually it's just it's like two guitars and a bass. Here's some drums to complement it. So it was nice to get that unexpected instrument in the mix. But yeah, man, this is a hell of a lot of fun. I could drink plenty of beer to this song. It just has that vibe to it. So yeah, I'm kind of surprised that I've never heard this band before, because it's music that I like. Like, no one had really ever suggested it to me. Do they have a large following, or is this like a cult, more exclusive UK thing?
It's really cult, and everybody who hears them says, I can't believe I've never heard of this band before. It's really odd.
Yeah.
So the interesting, I mean, yeah, my notes about the song are pretty much the same. Guitars. So I don't know if you saw from I think it's mentioned on it, this was 1980. Now,
okay. Yeah,
this album and the following album pretty much put the blueprint for most of the early to mid 80s British guitar indie music. You hear, particularly this second proper album, you hear like everybody has stolen from it. And not stolen, but been influenced or heard, because we're not all in bubbles. You get reacts and stuff, but it is so. Every musician has heard of the sound and appreciates them, and everyone would be name checking them of a certain era, and they'd laid the groundwork for so many bands. But it's an interesting story. So they actually started as a band called The Outsiders, and they were a punk band. They were very average competency, I should say. It's that punk DIY sort of spirit. So they actually put out the first ever British self-label album in 1977. And people sort of dispute whether it was really their self-label, because it was the main guy's parent who formed the record label just to put this album out for their son's band, which is quite sweet. They did another album. They weren't very successful. I mean, it's decent stuff. The second album is really decent. This is stuff I love, this sort of British punk. But then they sort of formed the sound, and they're from South London, England, you'll not be surprised. And they formed in 1979 and continued through till 1988. So the main guy, the driving force behind it, is a guy called Adrian Borland. He's vocals and lead guitar.
Okay.
Other guys in the band: Graham Bailey is bass, Mike Dudley is drums, and Colin Mayers. He sort of joined, I think, during or just after this album, plays keys. He used to be in the Cardiacs. He actually left just as the Cardiacs started getting going. They signed to the Korova, our label, which is the same label as Echo and the Bunnymen, who were doing these massive sort of strides in music at the same time. And you hear the cross references of the two bands clearly. But this is 1980. This is really early. People were copying this shit 3-4 years later. So really early Simple Minds, before they became commercial. So a lot of it sounds like this. Really early U2. There's so many songs that U2 have been influenced by. Buddy Man. There's loads more, and it really is a blueprint. So this album is called Jeopardy. Came out in 1980. It's got some amazing songs on it, and it's got that starkness. It's proper post-punk, so it has that feel to it. And the reason why I chose this track is because it's immediate and it's so fun and it's not complicated.
No, this is, I think, I'm sorry, I think this is like an excellent introductory song by a band. Like, it's just, like you said, it's pre-packaged and easy to eat. Just enjoy.
But by this point, they're tight. And his guitar work is amazing. The bass player is superb as well. Yeah. And he does a little thing in this, which he does in a lot in his second album as well, is he puts the guitar solo or the crescendo at the last minute of each song. So the last minute of each song really builds into a climax and finishes. And I love the way this song finishes. It's like, he's throwing everything at the dartboard at this point, and then boom, done. It's great. So Jeopardy came out in 1980 to universal acclaim by the music press and sold about 20 copies. No, for some reason, no one bought it. There was some mishaps or whatever in terms of publicity. So they went away and they came back, and they, I'm going to show you these because I'm proud I've got them. Their records were, up until 10 years ago, they were like about $600-700 each to try and get hold of. Crazy money. But they reissued a load of them, and I've managed to get most of them. So the second album, it's called From the Lion's Mouth. It is probably one of the finest guitar-based albums of the whole 80s from a British band.
Yeah.
It's really odd because there's songs on here, there's songs on Jeopardy that I prefer more, but as a whole album, I listen to this all the way through without even thinking about pausing, fast forwarding, flipping. at least once a week. I mean, it's just incredible stuff. It's a brilliant album. It really is. This got even more acclaim, and it was like, my God, this is one of the best albums we've ever heard. And it sold about 50, copies. It was just ridiculous. And
what the hell?
I know. And they were so frustrated. And so Kurova, who was a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, I believe, they said, can you do something a bit more commercial? And so in true sort of punk fashion, they went away.
Yeah, it's going to backfire when you ask about it.
And they came up with this album, which is known as the difficult album. It's bleak. It's not friendly. I absolutely love it. I think it's I think it's almost as good as From the Lion's Mouth. It's a misunderstood masterpiece. And it went down like a sack of shit with a record label and they dumped them. So, not good. Just very quickly. So they then re-signed to a small label and brought out an EP sort of in 84 called Shock of the Daylight. There you go. Great. A little bit more commercial sounding.
Wait, what year was that one? What year was their sort of like comeback album, if you will?
So the comeback proper album, that was an EP. It's got about 6-7 tracks on it.
Okay,
and then they brought back the comeback album in 85 called Heads and Hearts, which has got 3 or 4 amazing songs in it. It's not so much, it's a little bit more mainstream and it's good. It's good. Compared to everything out there. They did another album after that called Thunder Up, which I don't have yet on vinyl. I am worming my way through to catch a one. And then they brought out also a live album as well, which I've got. So I've got pretty much all of their stuff. And there's one more to go. And they called it a day pretty much after that. Now, all during this period, the lead singer Adrian was suffering from depression and other mental problems, which he was so exasperated because he was knocking out, which everybody would, tap him on the shoulder and say, you're doing the best music in this country at the moment, but no one was buying it. And it must have been so exasperating for someone to think, well, I've just knocked out, how can I make it any better? But there's this thing about quality and quantity, records unit sales did not mean quality. But that's a way you are judged in the music business if you want to continue making music, is are you shifting units? And they didn't. So he had a breakdown. It all went a bit messy, and he walked out or stopped during a live performance. They're very big in the Netherlands, and it was a gig there, and they basically called it a day. They tried to get back together but couldn't. He wasn't in a good place. He was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which is this combination of schizophrenia, depression, some mood stuff as well. He suffered a lot, to be honest with you.
It's like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, sort of,
and other stuff as well. It's like a collective adjective for with a sack full of issues. So he continued on. He worked other sort of projects with people. He did two solo albums, I think, which I haven't actually got. Again, they're on my list, but decent enough, not quite capturing the magic of the early days. And then, as you guess where I'm leading with it, it didn't end well for him. So he had already tried to commit suicide 3 times, including jumping in front of a car. And then it all came to head. I'm going to read you the passage because I think it's quite accurate from Wikipedia, and also I don't want to get this wrong. So they were worried about him. He was sort of up for doing this new solo album. He was really up for it, and then he suddenly became sort of anxious. And he was really, really scared of being sectioned in the hospital against his will. And he wrote to his parents about this. He then ignored all medical advice to pace himself, and he sort of threw himself into work, and he basically burnt himself out. He visited an ex-girlfriend of his and in London, and she said his thoughts were coming out loud, and at one point he said there's always the railway line. She called 999 to call the police, but at the time they arrived he'd already disappeared and was reported as a high-risk missing person. That night he turned up at Kennington police station claiming he was being chased. He later rang his mother to say he was in a curry house in Kennington. She alerted the police, and following a series of phone calls and hold-ups, he was eventually dropped off at his mother's home around 3:15 a.m. by the officers, who described his state of mind as lucid. At this point, as well, by coincidence, they were putting together another album of the sound stuff, and it was all these early takes. Basically, it's an album's worth of stuff before their first album, and there's a few alternate tracks that appeared on the first album. It's called Propaganda, if you can see that. And he actually wrote the sleeve notes for it. And then the day this came out, he killed himself. So on the night of the 25th, Borland slipped away to Wimbledon station, to railway station. In the early hours of the 26th, this was in, let me just get it right, 1999. So in the early hours of the 26th, horrified commuters watched as Borland died by throwing himself under a train. He was 41 years old. So it's quite sad. Now, if you listen to some of the songs, even really like a song on this album, I Can't Escape Myself, and others, you get a sense of this torment, this self-doubt and confliction within him. And it gives I'm listening to this, his music, there's a couple of things that are really interesting. I think his voice is amazing. And it's not like the best vocal performance you'll ever hear, but what it really has is sincerity. You believe what he's saying when he sings stuff. It's just incredible. The other thing which I think was really interesting is, as you say, they have this synth player that joins. And for me, guitar music with a synth came across from America in the 80s, and I couldn't stand any of it. It was really cheesy and awful. And this thing about decent indie guitar music with a synthesizer is awful. Now, there's a few tracks where it doesn't work, but in the main, he actually blended that really well. And, you know, some of the songs are just incredible, you know, and they really are an important band in terms of the history of British music, but they're unheralded. And because of that, I feel even more passionate about them. And I think everyone should, you know, listen to them at least. And, you know, I'm not saying that everyone will like them, but I think if you're of that bent that you like, you know, Joy Division or Echo the Bunnymen or any guitar band from the 80s, pretty much that's British, you know, you will like this. And again, later on, that revival, bands like Arctic Monkeys owe a lot to the sounds he developed in the early. I mean, it's really early, you know, that he brought out this stuff. So it's not a happy story, unfortunately. I'm always full of these horrible stories. I do apologize, but
no, it's one, I mean, come on, man, this is rock and roll. Like we talked about, you know, sometimes, like when you were talking about Cloud Cult, like that was a sad story, but it was a really it ended with like beautifully, and these are really good people and sound people, and they sort of, you know, welcome their fans and have this interesting relationship with them, which is not the norm. You know, normally you get these tragedies where the songwriters are the tragedy, whereas with Cloud Cult, they're writing about a tragedy, but they're a very, you know, sound group of folks. This is like the far too often you hear a story of a troubled genius who ends up, you know, offing himself either intentionally or through vices that plague them. The anecdote you told, this sort of chronological hectic night and early hours of the morning situation that he endured, how much time, what was the gulf of time between when that occurred and the his suicide?
24 hours.
That was all in 24 hours. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So,
it's almost, it's chaotic, isn't it? And I don't know enough about him personally to say, well, he didn't get the help that he needed, because clearly he didn't. But whether that was that you couldn't help him, some people you just can't force into these sort of things,
yeah.
And I guess him hitting, you say you got to hit bottom, but him hitting bottom was, well, 3 prior suicide attempts. I mean, there's real flashing danger warning signs, and I think probably they would have sectioned him, but that's what he was most afraid of. So it's a really tricky balance. I don't know how you help. I'm not qualified to say how you help these people.
Yeah,
but
yeah, that's tough, because
it's a real shame.
He already probably felt claustrophobic and closed in a world. So to take him and throw him in a white room, you know what I mean? And that would have completely sent him over the edge mentally. I mean, there would have been no saving that brain. It's a shame that's the hand he was dealt. And I wonder how much of it is sort of derived from his career and, the unmet sort of expectations and all the
that
energy he
can't be
drove
good for your
into
psyche.
yeah. It's it's gonna make you feel unwanted or unworthy or unuseful, and it just sucks. It's not a good feeling to have. I feel for the guy, especially when it was all good music. It was all honestly good music.
Yeah, I mean, but the good thing about it is they've had a bit of a revival. They've re-released 3-4 of their albums. They're, because of things like the YouTube and the internet, they're sort of, the word is spreading very slowly in sort of baby steps. But appreciation for him is undiminished. And again, I can't emphasize it enough. This album is one of the greatest, and that's his legacy. It's not all the weird, crazy shit. It's that he put out something which 99.9% of artists would kill to be able to get to something of that quality,
Yeah.
It is of its time, so it is slightly dated in its sound, but whether people see that as a negative or whatever, you just know it's of that time, so you enjoy it because it's of that time.
I could easily see it translating in a reimagined, modern produced way, which is almost something I'd like to hear, like remixed or remastered, kind of to bring it up to, because it would end up sounding like that shit from the early 2000s that was just like one of my favorites and all that good stuff. Like you said, I mean, I was taken there when I heard this, and knowing that it came out 20 or 25 years before that even is like, and that sucks too, that he couldn't be around to see that, like to see what his input, like his mark on the next generation of guitar rockers,
Yeah, you think of an album like, the Strokes' first album, that production, I know they have that scuzziness and he has that effect with the microphone, but it's still really, really well done.
Oh yeah. They were so good at capturing both the best from the old and the new in their first couple albums, man. Oof.
Yeah, very, very good. But anyway, so yes, so I'm really glad you liked it. There's more complex and more interesting stuff from them, but this is the one that is the hopefully no brainer for most people. Will just go, holy shit, listen to that guitar. And that's all you have to do.
The first thing I did, I really didn't stop thinking it until 3 minutes expired. And then I was like, oh my God, it's over. What an experience.
And the silly thing as well, this will sound really silly, but even the way he sings it in your Heyday, Heyday. And that's just really, I love it. And it's just a simple thing, that little sort of, but anyway. No, thanks a lot for listening to this. I'm really glad you liked it.
Thank you for offering it. Man.
It's a real. There's not many bands or tunes that I offer up that are really, really personal to me in terms of how much But this is a special one for me. So I'm really glad you liked it.
No, it was good, and I think it was great. A great for me song. Like
Yeah.
just because of how much the revival of this style of music hit with me. To hear some of the stuff that was like these gems that kind of influenced that sound that didn't get the same amount of pub that those guys did 25 years later, it's just really cool and interesting little path to go down. So I appreciate you taking me there.
Yeah, so everybody out there, thanks so much for watching this. Come on, there must be a few people who've heard of the sound.
Yeah.
Let me know what you think about Adrian Borland and his genius. Like and subscribe, comments all the way to the farm, and we will see you all next time on the next episode of Into the Music.